The origins of Halloween date back over 2,000 years to the ancient Celtic festival known as Samhain, celebrated by the Celts who lived in what is now Ireland, the United Kingdom, and parts of northern France. Samhain marked the transition from the harvest season to the long, cold winter. For these early Europeans, winter symbolized darkness and death, making Samhain a time when they believed the boundary between the world of the living and the dead was at its thinnest. On the night of October 31st, the Celts believed that the spirits of the dead would roam the earth. These wandering souls were feared to cause harm, damaging crops or spreading illness among the people. To protect themselves, the Celts built massive bonfires, both to ward off spirits and to honor their gods with offerings of crops and animals, asking for protection during the harsh winter ahead. Costumes also played a significant role in Samhain. People would disguise themselves in animal skins and other costumes, hoping to blend in with the spirits and avoid being noticed by them. The belief was that if the spirits couldn't tell who was living and who was dead, they wouldn't cause harm. In addition to this, the Celts used this mystical time for divination, as they thought the veil between the worlds was at its thinnest, making it the perfect time for druids to predict the future. These prophecies were critical for guiding the community through the difficult months ahead. Samhain wasn't just about warding off evil, though. It was also a time of feasting, celebrating the harvest, and coming together as a community. It honored both life and death, and, while it embraced a sense of the supernatural, it also focused on the future. As history progressed, Samhain evolved. When the Roman Empire conquered Celtic lands, Roman traditions such as Feralia, a day to honor the dead, and a festival for Pomona, the goddess of fruit, began to merge with Samhain's practices. Some historians believe this blending helped influence the modern concept of Halloween. By 609 AD, Pope Boniface IV established the Feast of All Martyrs, a day to honor Christian martyrs. Later, Pope Gregory III expanded it to include All Saints and moved the celebration to November 1st. This aligned it with Samhain, resulting in a fusion of pagan and Catholic traditions. Over time, November 2nd became All Souls' Day, a time to pray for the souls of the dead, with celebrations that included bonfires, parades, and costumes, now featuring saints, angels, and devils. This blending of Celtic and Catholic traditions eventually gave rise to All Hallows' Eve, the night before All Saints' Day, which over time became known as Halloween. The word Halloween itself is derived from All Hallows' Eve. Although the Catholic Church aimed to replace pagan festivals with Christian observances, many of the ancient customs, particularly those involving spirits and the supernatural, remained part of the holiday. In the 19th century, Halloween traditions crossed the Atlantic when Irish and Scottish immigrants brought their customs to America, particularly during the Irish potato famine. These included dressing up in costumes, playing pranks, and carving pumpkins, practices that continue today as central parts of Halloween celebrations. Halloween evolved from a festival that honored the dead into the fun, spooky holiday we know today, with deep roots in both ancient and religious traditions. In the early days of Halloween, the iconic jack-o'-lanterns were not made from pumpkins, but from turnips, serving as a precursor to today's glowing gourds. Originally, the Halloween celebration in America had a mischievous streak. Pranks and rowdy behavior were central to the festivities, with young people often causing chaos, damaging property, and engaging in tricks that blurred the line between fun and mayhem. However, by the late 19th century, a societal shift began. Communities sought to transform Halloween into a family-friendly holiday, focusing less on mischief and more on wholesome entertainment. Organized parties, parades, and festivals replaced the pranks, and costumes and treats took center stage. By the early 20th century, Halloween had become a mainstream holiday in the United States. One of the most notable developments was the rise of trick-or-treating, which became a widespread practice in the 1920s and 1930s. Children would don costumes and go door to door, asking for candy or treats in exchange for a promise not to trick the homeowners. This tradition echoed an older European practice known as souling, where people would go house to house on All Souls' Day, offering prayers for the dead in exchange for food. As Halloween gained popularity, it became increasingly commercialized. By the mid-20th century, stores were filled with pre-made costumes, decorations, and specially packaged Halloween candies. Today, Halloween is one of the most commercially successful holidays in the United States, second only to Christmas in terms of retail spending. But despite its modern-day transformation into a candy-fueled, costume-driven celebration, the question arises, should Christians celebrate Halloween? This debate has persisted for many years. Halloween's origins are undeniably pagan, and some of its modern practices, such as the fascination with fear, death, and the occult, seem at odds with Christian beliefs. For some, the mere fact that Halloween has pagan roots is enough to avoid it entirely. The festival of Samhain, which eventually evolved into Halloween, was steeped in beliefs about spirits, death, and the supernatural. While many of these elements have been toned down over the centuries, Halloween still retains themes of fear, darkness, and the unknown. The Bible, particularly in Deuteronomy 18:10 through 12, warns against any involvement in activities that deal with the occult, witchcraft, or divination. It states, "There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, one who uses divination, one who practices witchcraft, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who casts a spell, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For whoever does these things is detestable to the Lord." For Christians who believe that Halloween still carries its pagan and occult roots, participating in the holiday can feel like compromising their faith. It raises an important question. Is it wise to engage in a celebration so closely tied to practices the Bible warns against? Halloween, which aligns with Samhain, a sacred holiday for witches and pagans, remains a time when many engage in rituals to honor the dead and seek communication with the spiritual realm. This is no accident, but a continuation of ancient traditions that have survived through the ages. While modern society may have dressed Halloween in the trappings of harmless fun, costumes, candy, and playful festivities, Christians are often urged to look beneath the surface. What seems like innocent celebration on the outside may still be rooted in spiritual practices that the Bible clearly cautions against. Even though Halloween has been commercialized and stripped of many of its darker elements, witches and practitioners of pagan religions still view this time of year as one of deep spiritual significance. For many Christians, the decision of whether or not to celebrate Halloween comes down to a personal conviction. Some may choose to embrace the lighter, family-friendly aspects of the holiday, while others avoid it altogether due to its connections to witchcraft and the occult. Ultimately, the choice lies in each individual's faith and understanding of how Halloween aligns or conflicts with their beliefs. The Bible calls Christians to live a life set apart, dedicated to God. As it says in 1 Peter 1:16, "Be holy because I am holy." This call to holiness encourages believers to distance themselves from anything that might contradict God's will. One critical factor to consider when it comes to Halloween is the dramatic rise in the number of practicing witches and the resurgence of pagan spiritual practices. According to recent analyses, the number of practicing witches in the United States has grown significantly in the past few decades. In 1990, there were an estimated 8,000 witches. However, by 2018, that number had surged to around 1.5 million, surpassing the membership of some mainline Protestant denominations, including the Presbyterian Church. This remarkable growth reveals a broader cultural shift, particularly in Western countries. Events like the Pendleside Hospice Witch Festival, held at Barrowford Park in Lancashire in 2022, are reflective of this trend. That festival had 1,882 attendees, breaking the previous record of 1,677 set at a similar event in Spain in 2013. Imagine the reality of witnessing an event where over 1,000 witches gather to celebrate their beliefs. And this is not an isolated occurrence. While witches also celebrate other holidays, such as Yule, winter solstice, and Beltane, a spring festival, Halloween or Samhain remains the most significant for those who practice witchcraft. This fact alone should cause Christians to pause and consider their stance on participating in Halloween. The growing popularity of witchcraft and the continued association of Halloween with the occult reflect a spiritual environment that increasingly contradicts biblical values. In contrast to its pagan roots, Halloween in modern times has become highly commercialized. For many people, the holiday is no longer about honoring the dead or engaging with the supernatural. Instead, it has turned into a celebration focused on costumes, candy, and decorations. The emphasis has shifted from its darker religious aspects to light-hearted fun, which most people see as harmless. For Christians concerned about the pagan origins of Halloween, this commercialization could be seen as a positive development. The holiday has become so secularized that for many, it bears little resemblance to the ancient festival of Samhain. Its spiritual or religious significance has faded for much of the population. However, just because Halloween has become commercialized does not necessarily mean that it is appropriate for Christians to participate. Even though the holiday's modern form may seem harmless, filled with children dressed up in costumes, going door to door trick-or-treating, there are still aspects of Halloween that carry darker undertones. Haunted houses, horror movies, and costumes that glorify the occult or death continue to play a significant role in the festivities. These elements can send a confusing message to believers and non-believers alike. For Christians, participating in these darker aspects of Halloween can blur the lines between good and evil, potentially leading to spiritual confusion. One of the core principles of the Christian faith is the concept of freedom in Christ. While we are called to live according to God's word, we are also given the freedom to make choices in areas where the Bible does not provide explicit instructions. In Romans 14:5-6, Paul writes, "One person considers one day more sacred than another. Another considers every day alike. Each of them should be fully convinced in their own mind. Whoever regards one day as special does so to the Lord." This passage reminds us that, as Christians, we have the freedom to make decisions about how we observe certain days and holidays. Since Halloween is not directly mentioned in the Bible, the decision of whether or not to celebrate it ultimately comes down to personal conviction. For some Christians, Halloween might present an opportunity to engage with their community, building relationships through innocent activities like trick-or-treating or costume parties. These believers may find ways to participate without feeling as though they are compromising their faith. They focus on the fun and fellowship aspects of the holiday rather than its darker roots. However, for others, like myself, Halloween's association with the occult and the supernatural makes it too problematic to celebrate. In my family and local church, we choose not to participate in Halloween due to its pagan origins and its focus on fear, death, and the occult. We believe that as Christians, we are called to be distinct and not engage in activities that are rooted in pagan practices. As 1 Corinthians 10:31 reminds us, "Whether therefore ye eat or drink or whatsoever ye do all to the glory of God." This leads me to ask, can we truly celebrate Halloween in a way that glorifies God? Personally, I cannot, and I encourage others to consider doing the same. While some might argue that modern Halloween has little to do with its origins, we must look deeper. The increase in witchcraft, the continued celebration of occult practices, and Halloween's dark spiritual undertones present a real challenge to Christian faith. As followers of Christ, we are called to be in the world, but not of the world. We are to be a light in the darkness, and part of that is being mindful of the spiritual environment we engage in. For those who take their faith seriously, this is not a decision to take lightly. I invite you to reflect on your own convictions and share your thoughts. Can Halloween be celebrated in a way that aligns with Christian values, or do its pagan origins and current associations with the occult make it a holiday that Christians should avoid? Let's have a thoughtful discussion. Comment below with your perspective.